Secretary General, thank you so much for joining CNBC. I want to kick off by asking you to address the comments that we heard from the U.S. Secretary of Defense, essentially calling out China as the greatest threat to America's security. How do you think about that?
Well, we have seen the global balance of power shifting with the rise of China. China now has the second largest defense budget in the world, and they are investing heavily in new military capabilities. And that's also the reason why NATO has put China on our agenda. I think for the United States, the important message is that if the United States is concerned about China and the size and the rise of China, then it's even more important to maintain NATO, to keep your friends and allies close. Because together with Europe and Canada, we represent 50% of the world's military might and 50% of the world economy. So together we are strong.
When you think about what happens next with regards to the coronavirus, obviously it's early days yet, but the initial response from the Chinese government was one of denial, frankly, that there was an actual problem. How worrying is that to you with regards to their worldview on how to tackle big problems? Does that pose a threat to NATO?
Of course, this is a very serious situation, especially in China, but we have seen also the spread of this virus to other countries and to other continents. First of all, it is important that China do whatever they can to deal with this, to fight the virus. But the world is also working, and many allies are addressing it, and also the World Health Organization. NATO is not directly involved in those efforts because that's a health issue. But of course we are monitoring the situation closely because it affects potentially also all allies.
When you think about what happens next with regards to the NATO alliance itself, you have Secretary of State Mike Pompeo essentially saying, reports of the transatlantic alliance's death, highly exaggerated. At the same point, you have the German president calling out the United States for what he says is keeping their own interests ahead of the interests of their allies. It seems as if people are talking at each other as opposed to having a conversation. I know that this is something that you no doubt struggle with in your position, but how do you see this evolving?
So I think we have to understand that NATO, that's an alliance of 29 different countries from both sides of the Atlantic, different history, different political parties and governments, so of course there are differences. But the history has taught us that NATO has always been able to overcome differences and then unite around our core task to protect and defend each other. And that's exactly what we see today. There are differences on trade, climate change, but actually when it comes to defense and security, North America and Europe are doing more together than we've done for many, many years. The US is investing in defense, European allies are stepping up, so we are stronger and actually more agile and more ready now than we were just a few years ago.
European allies, as you say, are stepping up, but Germany is still lagging behind, and now there are a lot of conversations being had at the financial level and the market level about whether this is a country, the engine of European growth, that is about to head toward a recession. Does that worry you when we talk about the future of NATO, when we talk about a possible European defense fund, that the engine of European growth is slowing?
Well, so first of all, European allies are stepping up also when it comes to defense spending. After years of cutting budgets, all allies have started to increase and spend more.
Do you think Germany is going to ante up?
Well, Germany has also started to increase, and their plan is to increase defense spending by 80% over a decade, and they're already added significantly. In total, European allies and Canada will add $400 billion to their defense budgets by 2024. They've already added a lot. So when it comes to defense spending, we are really moving in the right direction.
You're getting there.
Yeah, and actually it's significant what we have seen. We didn't need to do more, but it's encouraging to see the significant increase we have seen so far. Then we have to keep up that momentum.
Are you worried about this European defense?
Well, European defense, if European defense is about strengthening Europe within NATO, then that's just fine. And actually the United States, NATO, we have called on Europe to do more for many, many years. So when they now do more, that's a good thing. This is about defense spending in Europe, about new capabilities, increased readiness of European forces. That's good for Europe, good for NATO. What we have to avoid is that Europe is trying to do something outside or establish something which is competing with NATO. And European leaders have stated again and again that this is not about an alternative, something to compete with NATO, but actually complementing NATO.
Is there a possibility, though, that by overlapping they could actually do more harm than good? Because you're spending more on two things that you don't necessarily need.
So we have to avoid, and that's also a message from Europe, that this is duplicating NATO or what I say, dividing Europe and North America. Anything that distances Europe from North America will not only weaken the transatlantic bond and our ability to compete on the global stage, but it will also divide Europe. So I believe in not Europe alone, not US alone, but I believe in America and Europe together, because then we are strong and then we are safe.
Finally, sir, when you think about what happens going forward in the Middle East, a lot of conversations, at least on the US side, about NATO playing a stronger role, not just in Iraq, but elsewhere. How do you see NATO's role in the region evolving? And does it need to increase?
NATO defense ministers made a decision just a few days ago where we decided to increase our presence in Iraq and to provide more support for the Iraqi security forces, because we strongly believe that the best way to fight terrorism, to make sure that ISIS is not able to return, is to enable the Iraqis themselves to stabilize their own country and to fight terrorism themselves.
So you see terrorism as really the greatest threat that could be exported to NATO countries?
That's the main reason why NATO is involved in the Middle East, North Africa, in very many different ways. That's the reason why we are looking into what more we can do in Iraq, but also in other parts of the Middle East. And that's also the reason why we have been in Afghanistan for many years. What we now do is that we hope that it's possible to reach an agreement with the Taliban. And if Taliban is able to demonstrate a clear will and ability to reduce violence, then we are ready to adjust the number of NATO troops in Afghanistan. There are currently 16,000 NATO troops in Afghanistan. We are ready to adjust that if Taliban delivers on reduced violence.
No doubt the families of those troops want to see their soldiers come home. Is it disappointing to you that in the end the Taliban is the group you have to negotiate with? Because they don't even have a sterling record on this.
Of course, Taliban has been responsible for violence, for oppressing people, for a brutal regime when they ruled Afghanistan. At the same time, the only way to create a lasting peace in Afghanistan is also talk to Taliban. And the purpose of the negotiations, the talks which are going on now, is also to initiate inter-Afghan negotiations. Because there is no way to find a lasting, sustainable peace in Afghanistan without the Afghans owning the peace process and reaching agreement between themselves. What we can do is to support the Afghans and sending a message to Taliban that they will never win on the battlefield. They have to sit down at the negotiating table and making real compromises and reduce violence.
Is this victory?
This is a way to peace, and this is a way to try to get the lasting peace arrangement, which is owned by the Afghans themselves, and we support those efforts.
Peace at any price?
No, we should not have peace at any price. So this is about finding a solution that can last, that can protect the gains we have made in Afghanistan. We have to understand that the reason why NATO went into Afghanistan was after an attack on the United States. And hundreds of thousands of soldiers from Europe, Canada, have served in Afghanistan in an operation in defense of the United States. And we are there to make sure that Afghanistan never again become a safe haven for international terrorists that can plan, organize attacks against the United States or all the NATO allies. But we try to do that in a way which also enables us to one day to leave Afghanistan and to hand over the full responsibility for the security in the country to the Afghans themselves.
Hi, I'm Joanna Bersecci, and thank you for watching. You can check out more of our videos by clicking on the boxes on the screen. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more from CNBC International. Thank you for watching.